Vikings, let's win the game.
The closer we get to Vikings training camp, the more questions seem to be replacing answers. Is Minnesota quietly betting on an unexpected solution at edge rusher? Did one potential veteran signing just disappear before it ever had a chance to happen? Is TJ Hockinson really entering a make-or-break season? Or are people missing the bigger picture? And while all of that unfolds, one of the most overlooked players on this roster is suddenly earning recognition across the league. 4 different stories, but together they paint a pretty clear picture of where this Vikings team is heading before training camp even opens. One of the biggest conversations surrounding this roster hasn't been about a superstar or a flashy free agent signing. Instead, it's about a position that suddenly feels a lot more uncertain than many fans expected. Everyone keeps asking the same question. Who exactly is going to become the third edge rusher behind Andrew Van Ginkel and Dallas Turner? Former Vikings general manager Jeff Diamond recently voiced concerns about the current depth, pointing out that Bo Richter, Tyler Batty, and Chaz Chambliss are intriguing developmental players, but not exactly the kind of names that keep offensive coordinators awake at night. Rookie Jake Golday has generated excitement because of his upside, but asking an unproven rookie to immediately fill such an important rotational role is asking a lot. Then Dustin Baker added even more attention to the situation by saying that while everyone will naturally focus on the quarterback battle involving Kyler Murray and J.J. McCarthy, the competition for OLB3 could end up being just as fascinating during training camp. And honestly, that's where this gets really interesting. Everybody seems focused on finding someone new while almost overlooking someone who's already been doing the job. Eric Wilson isn't some mystery project. Brian Flores already trusted him in multiple roles last season, and those responsibilities quietly expanded far beyond traditional linebacker duties. Wilson logged 336 snaps at edge in 2025 and produced a career-high 6.5 sacks while showing exactly the kind of versatility Flores loves. When you think about how Minnesota handled its secondary last season by using safety depth creatively instead of panicking over cornerback injuries, it suddenly becomes easier to picture the same philosophy carrying over into the front seven. The linebacker room is loaded with Blake Cashman, Ivan Pace, Jake Golday, and Wilson, all deserving meaningful snaps. Instead of forcing everyone into rigid positions, Flores can simply move pieces around until he creates the best matchup possible. The front office's actions also speak loudly here. Minnesota didn't chase a high-profile EDGE3 this offseason. Instead, they re-signed Eric Wilson to a solid 3-year deal, showing real confidence in what he already accomplished. Sometimes the biggest clue isn't the move a team makes, it's the move they choose not to make. If Wilson locks down that role again, the Vikings may have solved one of their biggest offseason questions without making a single headline-grabbing move. That's one battle worth watching from the very first day of training camp. Another storyline continues to evolve after one difficult offseason decision reshaped Minnesota's pass rush. Losing Jonathan Greenard wasn't something fans wanted to see happen, but contract negotiations reached a point where both sides simply couldn't find common ground. Greenard believed his production deserved a raise beyond the 4-year, $76 million contract he originally signed, while the Vikings chose financial flexibility instead. Philadelphia happily stepped in, trading draft capital before handing Greenard a brand new $100 million contract with $50 million guaranteed. That leaves Dallas Turner stepping into a much larger role, but it also creates understandable concern about the overall depth behind him. Naturally, Vikings fans immediately started wondering whether a proven veteran could still be added before the season. Joey Bosa quickly became one of those dream possibilities floating around the fan base. Unfortunately, Adam Schefter recently poured cold water on that idea by suggesting it's now more likely than not that Bosa has already played his final NFL snap. Retirement appears to be a very real possibility unless an ideal late-off-season situation changes his mind. Could something unexpected still happen? Absolutely. We've seen veteran stars wait deep into the offseason before signing, but if Schefter is hearing this much smoke, it's hard not to believe there's probably some fire behind it. That doesn't necessarily leave Minnesota without options. Veterans like Jadeveon Clowney or Kyle Van Noy remain available if the organization decides additional help becomes necessary after evaluating training camp. Still, not every piece of Vikings news this week carries disappointment. One offseason addition is quietly earning national recognition. Bleacher Report recently named Jawan Jennings one of the NFL's most underrated wide receivers, highlighting everything Vikings fans hoped he'd bring to this offense. Jennings isn't built on blazing speed. He's built on toughness, route discipline, physical play, and relentless effort. Last season, 45 of his 55 receptions either moved the chains or ended in touchdowns. Exactly the kind of dependable production every offense craves. Imagine opposing defenses trying to account for Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hockenson, and now Jennings all at the same time. Minnesota already featured one of football's most dangerous receiving duos. Adding Jennings could legitimately give Kyler Murray one of the league's deepest collections of pass catchers. The pass rush may still have unanswered questions, but this offense suddenly feels capable of putting pressure on defenses every single week. Sometimes a player's numbers tell one story, while the full picture tells something completely different. That's exactly where TJ Hawkinson finds himself entering what many people are calling the biggest season of his Vikings career. ESPN's Bill Barnwell recently labeled 2026 as a make-or-break year for the Pro Bowl tight end, arguing that Hockenson hasn't looked like the same player since tearing his ACL late in 2023. On the surface, it's easy to understand why that narrative exists. His production over the past 2 seasons hasn't matched the incredible impact he made immediately after arriving in Minnesota. But once you start digging deeper, things become a lot more complicated. Hockenson didn't simply wake up one day and become a less talented football player. His opportunities changed dramatically. Over the last 2 seasons, he ran far fewer routes than during his peak years, while also seeing his lowest target total since his rookie campaign. That's not entirely about individual performance. The offensive line battled injuries throughout 2025, forcing Hockenson to spend much more time helping in pass protection before even releasing into routes. Anyone who's watched football long enough understands what that means. Delay a receiver by even a second and the quarterback's progression often moves elsewhere. Add inconsistent quarterback play into the equation and suddenly everyone in the passing game becomes less productive. Then there's the context surrounding 2024. Hockenson missed the first 7 games while recovering from his knee injury, yet still averaged around 4 catches and roughly 45 receiving yards per game once he returned. Considering the circumstances, that production wasn't nearly as disappointing as many remember. The reality is the Vikings don't necessarily need the version of Hockenson who dominated with multiple 70-yard performances every month. This offense has evolved. Justin Jefferson remains the centerpiece. Jordan Addison continues developing. Jaylen Jennings adds another reliable target. If Hockenson simply becomes the dependable chain mover who occasionally delivers a game-changing catch over the middle, he'll remain incredibly valuable to Kevin O'Connell's system. His future in Minnesota shouldn't be judged solely by whether he returns to career-best numbers. It should be measured by how he fits within one of the league's deepest passing attacks. If that happens, the conversation around his future could look very different by the end of the season. One of my favorite things about football is watching overlooked players force everyone to pay attention. Every season there's somebody who wasn't supposed to matter that much, yet somehow becomes one of the most important pieces on the roster. For Minnesota, Jaylen Redmond is starting to feel exactly like that kind of story. His path here wasn't glamorous. After going undrafted, spending time with Carolina, and then rebuilding his career in the XFL with the Arlington Renegades, very few people expected him to become an important contributor for an NFL defense. But that's exactly what has happened. The Vikings recognized something special, brought him into the building, and have watched his development continue every year since. Recently, Pro Football Focus rewarded that progress by naming Redmond to its NFL All-Undrafted team, praising not only his consistency, but also his ability to line up across multiple spots along the defensive front. That's an enormous compliment considering how many undrafted success stories exist throughout today's NFL. Looking at his production makes the recognition easy to understand. His defensive snap count exploded from just over 200 plays in 2024 to nearly 800 in 2025, and with those opportunities came 35 total pressures, numerous quarterback disruptions, 5 batted passes, 39 defensive stops, and a forced fumble. Even if some of his grading dipped slightly compared to the previous season, his overall impact grew tremendously because coaches trusted him with far more responsibility. Now the next chapter begins. After moving on from expensive veterans, Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave, Minnesota doubled down on youth by drafting Caleb Banks and Dominique Big Citrus Orange. Suddenly, the defensive interior features a fascinating blend of emerging talent rather than relying on aging veterans. Redmond isn't carrying the load alone anymore. He's part of a young rotation that could develop together over several seasons. That's exciting because defensive lines thrive when waves of fresh players keep coming onto the field without a major drop in production. If Redmond continues climbing while Banks and Orange adjust quickly to the NFL, Brian Flores could quietly build one of the deepest young defensive fronts in the conference. Championship defenses aren't built only through blockbuster signings. Sometimes they're built because someone refuses to let go of an opportunity, and Redmond is proving exactly why the Vikings believed in him. That's why this time of year always feels so fascinating. Training camp isn't just about stars proving they're still stars. It's about hidden opportunities, unexpected battles, and players who can completely reshape the direction of a season before week 1 ever arrives. Whether it's Eric Wilson embracing a bigger defensive role, Jawan Jennings strengthening an already dangerous offense, TJ Hawkinson looking to silence the doubters, or Jaylen Redmond continuing his remarkable rise, every one of these stories will be worth following over the next few weeks. Let me know which storyline you're watching most closely, and as always, we'll be right here following every step of this journey. Stay tuned. SKOL Vikings, let's go.